Welcome to Tikvah Radio Show, The Sound of Hope. I'm Liliana Inez, your host. Someone once said that God speaks to people in different ways. Did you ever have dreams, visions, or a special experience in which you felt God was speaking to you? The Torah tells us that Abraham, Jacob, and many others heard and experienced God. Does Adonai speak to people like that nowadays? On Tikvah Radio, we interview people who have had an encounter with the God of Israel, a special experience. Some have even had personal miracles, and all have found the Messiah of Israel. Stay tuned to Tikvah Radio Show and hear an amazing story of someone who was encountered by God. Welcome, Mishpaha. Today our guest is Michael Walker. Michael is the founder of Congregation in the City, Beth Abraham, located in the heart of Denver, Colorado. They have been ministering to the poor, oppressed, and needy, along with at-risk youth in the inner city of Denver for over 25 years. Michael has several honorary doctorates, one of which is from the Denver Institute of Urban Studies and Adult College. Michael has partnered with several humanitarian ministries in the inner city of Denver. Through Michael's leadership, Congregation Beth Abraham is committed to bringing hope to those who are struggling with real-life issues in the inner city of Denver. Please welcome with me Michael Walker. Welcome to Tikvah Radio Show, Michael. We're so glad to have you here with us today.
Well, I'm happy to be with you.
Awesome. So, Michael, you were raised in the Bronx. Can you tell us a little bit about life in the Bronx?
Well, I was quite young when I was living in the Bronx. My grandfather had a synagogue there, which was a few blocks from where we lived as well. So we kind of all lived in the same neighborhood. And I had gotten struck with polio back in 1949, it was, and when the polio epidemic was hitting New York City. And I had basically a 50-50 chance of making it. They had no cures, and my dad reminds me that he was in the car praying to God for my life, and that basically he dedicated my life to God if I would survive, and so on. And here I am many years later. And so growing up there, and then I did a normal New York journey from the Bronx to Queens to Long Island, raised in a conservative Jewish house, bar mitzvahed when I was 13, celebrated the holidays, but never really, even though my grandfather was Orthodox, never really got into the Orthodox, more into the hippie lifestyle when I was in college. And after graduating college, I went on this journey because there was something missing in my life, and I was looking for the answer to life, and I had no idea what that was or what that looked like. So I started out on this journey in a Volkswagen bus in Europe, and just driving all over Europe, and was hoping to find the answer to life, and wound up on this island in the middle of the Mediterranean called Ibiza, where a bunch of hippies were living. This was like in 1970, and I thought, well, this must be the answer to life. I had a motorcycle, just cruised around in a pair of shorts and a T-shirt, and lived on this beautiful island, and thought this had to be the answer to life. Required one drug deal a year, and you were set for that year. And but then what happened was the dictator of Spain decided, I'm going to throw these hippies in jail and take away their passports. And I realized that wasn't the answer to life. I didn't want to spend it in a Spanish prison. So I wound up going back to New York and working for my dad, who owned a printing plant in New York City. And it was really a hard transition from living in a cave and on an island in the middle of the Mediterranean and working in a printing plant in the middle of New York City. And it just wasn't where I fit, and it was really difficult because I had to tell my dad that I couldn't work for him anymore, and he threw this real heavy thing called Jewish guilt on me and said, if you leave this business that I built for you, I'll never talk to you again. And, I said, well, I can't do this. And I wound up going out to California, and I'm still looking for the answer to life and what is life all about. And it just something in my Jewish background that just there was something missing. And I would go around and met some friends who were all Jewish out there too, and we were just hanging out and doing all crazy stuff and drugs and all that. But I had met this one gal who was going to a guru, and it happened to have been a gal who wound up marrying George Harrison of the Beatles.
Oh, really?
And she took me to this guru who had the answer to life, and I thought this must be it. And so I went, and I noticed that these people were raising their hands, asking for the answer to what this life is supposed to be. And he would ask them, how many years you've been coming to this meeting? And they said 2 years. Another one said 3 years. And he kept telling people, you're not ready for the answer to life yet. And they're kissing this guy's feet, and he's driving off in a Rolls Royce all the time. And I'm thinking, I can't kiss this guy's feet for the next 3 years to find out what the answer to life really is. So I continued my journey. I had no clue what I was looking for. I certainly wasn't looking for religion or anything like that. And I was out one night with some friends of mine, all Jewish from New York. There were about 6 of us, and we were sitting at a table, and there was some people at another table next to us that were happy and laughing, and I always wondered what were making people happy, and we wanted to make contact with them, so we wrote notes back and forth to each other and laughing, and we had a really good time. And then as they were leaving, they said, hey, you guys want to come up to our house in Malibu? We're having we provide meals every Wednesday night for anyone that wants to come, just hang out and, and bring your friends and all that. And I said, wow, that sounds like a fun time. And so we would go there, me and my whole group of friends, and they'd feed us, and we'd sing Beatles songs and just hang out. And every week we'd go back every Wednesday night. We'd get a free meal and hang out. And then finally they said to me, Michael, next week we're having this big happening in a castle in Hollywood. Would you guys like to come? And I said, wow, that sounds great. So when we left, I thought, wow, this is one of those great Hollywood parties I always wanted, and and this is going to be exciting. And so 6 of us drove up to this castle the following week, all Jewish from New York people. We didn't know what we were getting into. We thought it's going to be one of these amazing Hollywood parties. And so we get to this place, and it was a castle, and it was all these cars were parked outside, and the 6 of us all went in, and we walked down this long corridor and got to the edge of this big room with all these people in it. We didn't know anyone in there, really. And I walked into the middle of this room, and my other friends went to the corner because it was a very intimidating sight. And I was just standing in the middle of the room, and this guy just walks up to me, and he winds up tapping me on my head. I wind up, right before that, when I was standing at the edge of that room and I looked into that room, something inside of me said, Michael, this is it. This is what you've been looking for your whole life. And I didn't even know what it was or what these people were into. But I just walked in the middle of the room, and again, I was just standing there, and this guy walked up to me, touched me on my head. I wind up falling on the floor, confessing Yeshua as the Messiah without anyone even telling me that this was about anything about religion or Jesus or anything like that. God just touched me and sovereignly revealed himself to me. Wow. And there I was on the ground, and people were praying over me, and I never experienced anything like that. I never saw anyone fall over. I didn't even know. I was like in shock, lying there on the ground. And people were praying things like the blood on me, and it was like I thought I was bleeding because I hit the ground pretty hard. But while I was lying there and confessing without anyone even mentioning the word Jesus or Yeshua to me, it just was coming out of my own mouth.
Wow.
My friends tried to grab me and take me and said, "This ain't no Hollywood party. This is some religious thing." Da, da, da. And I looked at the people praying that were just so peaceful, and my friend was so angry. And I just said, "I'm staying, and I'm not going anywhere." And all my friends left, and I wound up staying there on the ground. I think I was on the ground for about 4 hours. And my whole life changed right at that moment.
Wow, that's huge.
And it was like a sovereign act for me, and because I wasn't looking for Jesus, I wasn't looking for any of that. I was just looking for, what is love? And then I found out, okay, God is love, Yeshua is love, and that's the whole thing I was looking for, but I didn't know that. So I wound up actually moving into that castle, and the minister that I found out that they invited a Jewish girl to that meeting to pray for, and she refused. And so the minister said, okay, if the Jews don't want this Jewish anointing, I'm going to give it to a Gentile. And that's when he walked up to me in the middle of that room and he thought I was some Italian Pentecostal because I had an afro and all that. But he didn't know he was really giving it to a Jew. If that one Jew rejected it, I got it. And it changed my life, and that was 46 years ago. I never looked back.
How did you feel when you were on the floor and you explained to people? I'm sure a lot of people listening have never experienced that. How did you feel? I never experienced it either.
But I was feeling such peace. I was just feeling like I didn't even want to move. I was feeling loved and cared for, and just like a weight was lifted off of me. I was supposed to take LSD the next day and go to Joshua Tree and watch the sun come up. But it was from that moment on, I felt so naturally high. All I could say was yes. Yeah, that's the only word that would come out of my mouth was yes, yes. Something happened to me, and that I've never looked back in the other direction 46 years later.
Did you have just you no longer wanted to do the drug scene anymore?
No.
It was over in an instant.
Yeah, it was like God just set me free from the stuff of this world and the things that, and it set me on a path because I didn't know the Bible at all. I didn't know any of that. This was just something that happened to me, and I had to get it all filled in along the way as I wound up actually moving into that castle. And the head minister was also developer of the artificial heart. He had a laboratory in the castle. And,
wow.
And I lived in the tower, he lived in the dungeon, and we were developing this heart to be able to minister to people through open doors that this would give. And it was just a very unique setting in 1970 for me to begin my journey, and then just learn about who God was, and that God was love, and that he did have a plan and purpose for my life, and just things like that were just very unreligious but very real to my needs and my desire. And who would have known that at that point that I would have wound up being a pastor for the past 30 years, and all the stuff that God has done in my life after that time. So
wow. And that happened so quickly too. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah, and it was interesting because some of them, the people that were with me, some, I received it and they chose not to, and my life just changed in an amazing way. That I could never have even hoped for anything like that to happen, because I wasn't looking for religion at all. But something more of a spiritual thing happened to me on my inside that changed my whole perspective on life, and what I felt now was a reason and purpose for my life.
Well, in a sense, you had religion before, because you said that your grandfather was...
Yeah, rabbi, yeah.
Yeah, he was a rabbi. So you had a form of religion before, and that wasn't doing it for you. So what happened to you was something that wasn't, maybe, I don't know how you would describe religion, but what happened to you was like a personal encounter with God.
Yeah, it was more of a supernatural than a natural thing. It was like when God revealed himself to me and revealed his son to me, that it just opened my eyes to a whole nother perspective about what this life was all about.
So, and do you feel that God has that for everyone?
I do. I mean, I believe anyone that would choose to allow him to reveal himself to them and be able to take the prayer, if you're who you say you are, show me who you are, make yourself known to me in a way that I can receive you, in a way that I can be aware that you're real. I believe that's available to everyone.
That's wonderful. It just gives you a feel of that God has a heart to connect with people in a personal way, that religion is not just some form and a list of things that you believe in, but there's actual relationship.
Yeah, I think, religion is trying to figure out a way to get to God and get him to like you or love you. But the relationship is allowing him to get to you and reveal his love to you, because that's what he wants to do. And I had the opportunity over the years to see my mother, father, sister, and brother all come to know him as Messiah as well, which was an amazing journey, because at first they disowned me. They didn't want anything to do with me. But after my mom watching me for 25 years saying, you got something I don't, and I want what you have, would you pray for me? And I did. And my dad wound up in prison for a white-collar crime, and after that, he came out and he gave him his life to the Lord. Wow. And God worked that out in his life, and my brother moved out to LA, and it happened to him, and my sister as well. And it just, seeing how God works, if you're really open to knowing and desiring him, he will make himself known to you.
Yeah. So they saw this tremendous change. So can you give us some specifics? What was Michael like before he had that God encounter, and how you changed after you had the God encounter? Because your family, it's one thing you preach to somebody or you tell somebody something or other. Family knows you like nobody else does, and they could see the complete change. Can you describe a little more specifically as how you change, and what was that really impacted them, that they saw Michael in a different way than they had known him?
Well, I remember when I first, after I came to know the Messiah, I was in LA, and a few months later, I decided to go back to New York to visit my family. And they really didn't know what was going on with me. But my father still hadn't talked to me because I left. And my mother, brother, and sister were the ones that picked me up at the airport. And when I was on the plane going back, I was like shining. I was. People were being attracted to me. What's with you? I was just there was a glow about me, I guess. I was just happy. And it was not drugs that got me there.
That's great.
I thought it was because I needed drugs to make me feel good or feel better or whatever. But I was just totally joyful. And when I got off the plane, when they saw me, they said something has happened to Michael. They could see it on me. They could see just a new perspective and a joy without being under any intoxication of any kind. But he said, and I didn't say anything to him because no one said anything to me at first. So I didn't tell him, oh, I got this or that, or I got saved. But I just let my light shine. And my dad, when we got back, he had kind of locked himself in his room. He didn't want anything to do with me. And I walked in the door where he was, and I walked up to my dad and just told him how much I loved him. And he broke down crying in my arms. And my brother, mother, and sister saw that, and they said, something's happened, Michael. He's changed. Because I was always in fear of my dad and all of that. So they noticed, they saw my life just getting... and with a different perspective, and no drugs, and no doing crazy stuff that I used to do, and they just saw my life take on a different direction, and it was fruitful, it was fulfilling, and they watched and they saw and they said, I want what you got, whatever that is.
That's great. And you had a joy and a peace they didn't have, and that you hadn't had before. That's amazing. So, what happened next for you? How did your life change as far as, your vision about life? How did God lead you in life?
I wound up going back to New York, and when I got back to New York, my mom takes credit. And said, Michael, you need to go to Denver. There's a lot going on out there, and da-da-da. So I wound up moving out to Denver in 1981. And I wound up attending a church here. And because I didn't know much about my Jewish roots and how they came into play with what I believed in. So I was at a church, and I wound up getting involved in just different ministries in the church. I was doing their singles ministry, and I was doing their benevolence and emergency assistance, and started the largest recreation ministry in Colorado, and just all as a volunteer. I was doing all this stuff because I just loved serving God. I was like excited. And then my pastor started preaching about ministry to the poor and the needy. And so in our little Bible study, we talked about ministry to the poor and needy. We prayed about ministry to the poor and needy. We did Bible studies about it. And then someone had the amazing idea, why don't we do something about it? And that was like, wow, a revelation, because we were out in the suburbs. So we decided, well, let's go into the city and find people that are hurting and poor and hand out a sandwich. And so we would do that, and I was in charge of the mustard. So we would make 200 bologna sandwiches and drive into the city and find someone and hand them a sandwich on the corner if they were hungry, and just tell them God loved them. And then we wound up saying, well, there must be something better to do than just do that. Then we wound up going to different places, homeless shelters and drug rehabs, and bringing actually the church into these places to the people that weren't going into church, bringing the answer to life to them because they weren't going anywhere, and bringing worship and the word and food and all this, and doing like 3 or 4 services a week in the city, and recognizing God was really touching people outside the 4 walls of the church and just where they were at. And then we were doing that for like 4 or 5 years. We were doing services and shelters, 300 guys on beds in warehouses, and just bringing the love of God to where they were, where everyone else has given up on them, and so on. And it was like, reminded me of Matthew 25, what you've done to the least of these. And so wherever the least of them were, that's where we wanted to be. Right. Even though not many people wanted to go there because it wasn't going to help advance the church's resources, or it was going to not really do anything special. But to me, it was like so special because we get to minister to Yeshua when we're ministering to them. So we did that for 5 years, and then Lord spoke and made it clear you need to stay in the city instead of going 3 or 4 times a week back and forth and bringing the church down there. But you need to start a church in the city, and that's Church in the City. That's how we started that in 1991. And it was an amazing journey how we got there. We got a little storefront on the main drag here next to the tattoo parlor, the S&M shop, the gay bar, and we're right in the middle of it. Wow. During the summer of violence, shootings going on down here and so on, we all moved down to the city, and it was very challenging. But we just prayed in this old storefront. We didn't really start a church. We just prayed, what do you want us to do, God? We inquired of the Lord. We gathered together once a month and every 2 weeks, and people would come and join us. And then we wound up going to, God put on our hearts to go back to New York to meet with Dave Wilkerson. Are you familiar with him?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Times Square Church, and because he was doing something we heard that God was putting on our heart to do, and we didn't have a model for it, a cross-cultural, multiracial, multi-denominational, multi-generational, multi-economic congregation, and so we went, and before we went, this guy had a word for us, and he said, you people in your congregation are going to be trash pickers. You're going to take trash that the world counts as trash and turn that trash into treasure, and that treasure is going to tell first the church and then the world about the faithfulness of God in their lives. And so that was an interesting word for me, being a trash picker. I did have a college degree, but whatever God was telling us, I was open to that. And then, so we decided to go to New York before we even started anything, and meet with Dave Wilkerson. And my brother-in-law had a dream. All he said was, look for the parable in the upper room, and we had no idea what that meant in any way. But when we got to New York, we found out that Dave Wilkerson's outreach ministry in Times Square was called the Upper Room, which I thought was very interesting. So we went up there. There were a team of us of about 6, and went in to this place. It was 3 stories up in a very bad neighborhood, and we went in this room, and there were heavy-duty street people there, but you just sensed the presence of God was so strong in that place. And this guy was just worshiping on a 5-string guitar, and God's presence was so strong. And this guy came up to the microphone and said, I've been a male prostitute for many years, but God brought me up to this place and saved my life, and now I'm sharing about God and what he's done in my life with people all over. And, and then I was just thinking of the word we got, trash into treasure, and that will tell the church and then the world about the faithfulness of God. And now we were hearing what he was telling us, he was showing us. And then on the board there was a parable, just like my brother-in-law's dream. And I was kind of freaked out about that. I didn't really want to look at it, that parable in the upper room that he dreamt about. So I didn't look at it, and finally I did. And then basically he said, what I've told you figuratively, I'm going to show you plainly about what my Father wants or who he is. And that whole trip before we started, he showed us plainly about what he told us we were going to do in this place. called Church in the City, and it began with that trash into treasure guy that God confirmed that to us, and throughout that whole trip to New York.
Can I ask you, can you clarify what you mean by trash? You're sharing about maybe people's lives that the world doesn't think people that are important.
Homeless, those that are on drugs, those that... This warehouse we would minister in were 300 guys that were totally rejected by every other shelter in New York. In Denver. And it was called the Salvation Army Survival Shelter. They were just surviving in there on rice and beans in a whole warehouse with a roof on their head. And they were given up on.
Wow.
And those are the ones that God was going to make into treasure. And over the years, we saw that happening.
That's
that's when I say trash, what the world counts as that.
Well, Michael, can you give us one example of how you saw God transform somebody's life like that? Somebody
Sure.
One of those people that even those that are rescuing people didn't know what to do with. Can you share?
Yeah, there was a gentleman by the name of Floyd Ridley. He lived in a dumpster right next to the church. And we'd minister to him and reach out to him, and it was really tough getting through to him. And what happened was he did finally give his life to the Lord. And there's an expression about laying hands too quickly on someone. When someone gets saved and they have this amazing testimony, you want to get them out there in front of all these people and all that. And we did that too quickly, and he wound up falling. But then he wound up getting his life back, and then he left, and I never heard from him. This was in the 90s. And a couple of years ago, I got this letter from somebody who sent me a newspaper article about Floyd Ridley, and apparently he moved to Kentucky, and he wound up getting the Kentucky Colonel Award, which is given once every 5 years, and Winston Churchill, Ronald Reagan, and now Floyd Ridley got that award. He's in that type of company by what he's doing with his life and sharing and helping others that have been struggling. So that, when I saw that, because you never know. Sometimes you're reaching out to someone and you never know what's going to happen with them, and that's not up to us to make them become like a Floyd Ridley and win this amazing award and he's a speaker all over that state now for helping people and so on. But this guy lived in a dumpster. He was done. He was given up on.
So what you're saying is that God has a plan for everybody. He doesn't see people as hopeless or trash, or that there's nothing you could do for them. That do you believe God has a plan for every person, and he can turn their life around and make it meaningful for themselves and others?
Yeah, I do. They're not hopeless. They may be without hope, but when you give someone hope that's without hope, that changes everything.
Awesome.
None of them are hopeless. None of us were hopeless. We just were without hope.
So you're saying Messiah is hope, that he has the power to bring hope into our lives.
I mean, he is our only hope.
Yeah.
Because all the programs, they help to a point. But unless you have a change on the inside out, you can have a roof on your head and even get off of alcohol. But if you don't have him in your life, you could still go to hell with a full stomach.
Wow.
Oh, he's our hope for this life and the life to come.
Right. So you see a difference between somebody just giving some humanitarian help, helping somebody just survive, and when God comes in your life through the Jewish Messiah, that can totally transform you, and you can see that you're not trash. You're a treasure to God, and he has something good for you in life. I mean, it was God's power that turned that man around, and he saw his value in life, and now he's making a difference to society, where before people thought, he was not someone they felt was going to get anywhere.
No, he was the dumpster man.
Yeah, I mean, that's huge. That's huge.
Yeah, it is. I mean, we do both. To me, it's not an either or. It's not, be warmed and filled and God loves you, and not help the need. We work with the homeless. We do outreach 3 mornings a week and 1 night a week, and on Saturdays, and feeding. But we're also presenting the gospel to them as well. And they know that we care. We care for them. And we work with about 25 other ministries partnering because it's all about the kingdom. So they use our synagogue here to reach out to those with brain damages, to reach out to the local high school here with 2,400 kids, to reach the at-risk youth. Our heart has always been, the kingdom coming first, and, ministering to those, but bringing in the partnership of other that have the same heart and the same DNA. Luke 4:18, Matthew 25, Isaiah 58. Those are scriptures that talk about caring for the poor, the needy, the lost, those that nobody else cares for, and so on. And Yeshua said that's his heart, to preach good news to the poor, to bind up the broken heart, to set at liberty those who are in bondage. I mean, that is the heart of God. It's not all about us and how to have the best life now. It's about how to have make the most impact on other lives now, and that's what fulfills us. And we get blessed doing it.
Well, you were raised in a probably comfortable home in New York. Then Absolutely. You take off to be a hippie. You're feeling that something's missing. You get into the hippie lifestyle, and then you get into drugs and all that, and you're looking for fulfillment. And you don't find it with the hippie lifestyle, but then you have this amazing, crazy God encounter in a castle in California, and that turns your life upside down. And now you are, God has led you to go help people that are down and out, the dumb people, the trash people that others might look, with their own eyes and say, well, what kind of value does that person have, with that lifestyle? But you are feeling a fulfillment. You come out of this background and you feel led to go and help other people. And this is something that God has led you to feel, and that's really fulfilling your life. How does that feel to you? How does that?
Yeah, I mean, it's really in my DNA now. I mean, I can't think of doing anything else than really being able to see somebody, a life change, no matter where they're at. Whether they have a lot or have a little. God's no respecter of person. We all need to come into that understanding of his love, his mercy, his forgiveness, and his desire to, when we follow him, we do what's on his heart. And that's, I like the old Salvation Army mission statement. It was one word, it was others. And too many, it's about us. And when you've been fulfilled by God in every area of your life, you don't need to keep focusing on yourself. You just want to be able to touch others and let them come to have that same experience that you have.
Yeah.
With a God who loves them. Are they perfect? Some may never even get off the street, but they might know God, and God is gonna receive them. Sometimes in the world we think, you have to live a certain way to know that you're successful in life, and that's not necessarily so. Jesus didn't even have a place to put his hat, and so, I wanted to also mention that other area with us, if I can.
Yeah.
That we were able to, when we were leaving, we got that storefront, and then we moved into an old supermarket just 2 blocks away, and an old Safeway store that we restored, where the trash into treasure all came about. And it was kind of interesting because we checked out where the location of that our church building was, and we found out it was on the city dump of Denver, Colorado. 1914 was the dump, so we're actually turning trash into treasure on the old city dump.
Oh, that's interesting.
We didn't even know that either.
Wow.
And but after 17 years, we were deciding that we needed to move, and I think I had signed a 20-year lease, and we had about 3 years left, and we knew we were going to have to do something. And right across the street was an old synagogue, and I said, wow, that would be amazing to move into that old synagogue. And but it was abandoned in 1969, and this was like the year 2007, and others had come in, and it was an Indian center where they were doing crazy stuff. And when the Jewish community moved out, then it became a nightclub, a rave called Synagogo. That was a big sign outside the synagogue.
Oh,
and I'm not kidding, because I saw it in a Denver magazine.
Yeah.
And they were doing all drugs and partying in that synagogue. And then a woman bought it to put condominiums in it, and she was too short of a pre-sale. And then Satanists moved in and took over and drew pictures of demons everywhere in that synagogue, and said that only Satan can worship in this place, and it was being destroyed by these Satanists. And then the Irish community came and bought it, and they were going to make it into an Irish community center and tear down all the pagan, the Jewish symbolism and the menorahs in there, and put up pagan things, and that didn't work at all. And then the final thing was that someone was going to put townhomes in there, and that didn't work. And I was praying like for a year where we were supposed to move to, and there was the street in front of us, and the synagogue was across that street. And the name of the street was Josephine. I called it the Jordan, and I preached about crossing the Jordan into the promised land of our synagogue there. And we never knew how that was all going to work. And we wound up that we told God we're not going to make it into anything other than it was what it was built for 100 years ago, to worship the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and make it into a synagogue, not into a church, not into anything other than what it was. And God was faithful. It was about a $5 or $6 million project, and we were an inner city church with homeless. So I can't even get into the details how that all came about, because the place was destroyed. It had to be fixed up. It was all broken windows. Pigeons were living in there. Ceilings were caved in. It was raining in there. It was ready to be torn down, that building. And but God had other plans for it, and we had a guy who wanted us to move, and he said, I'll help you get that other place, and if you break your lease, and we can put this $80 million project on this, where this Safeway store was. And we said, yeah, if you can help us get that synagogue, we'll move, we'll break our lease. And we still needed a $3 million loan. And we met a bank and said, well, we got a loan for you for this specific location and what you're doing and all that for 1%.
Wow.
So we said, we'll take it.
Wow, that's amazing.
But the funny, amazing part was the loan closing was on Rosh Hashanah of 2008. The day the stock market was dropping to minus 777. the day all the money was going away. And I remember sitting in that closing room for 6 hours. And they're saying, Michael, all the money's gone away. This deal is not going to happen. The synagogue's not going to be yours. It's not going to, it's like, and I'm going, okay, well, God, if that's the case, then it ain't going to happen. And 5 minutes to 5 in Cleveland, Ohio, where the main bank was, where there were 5 minutes left, or else nothing could have happened. All the money was gone, and someone decides to send us $3 million. They press a button and send the money. 5 minutes later, it would have been all over. So I think God was just showing me this had nothing to do with you, Michael. This is something that I'm doing because I want this synagogue restored to be a house of worship to me, where Jews and Gentiles can come together as one. And that's the Ephesians 2:14 scripture that was added to our vision statement, that he was breaking down the walls of hostility between the two groups, which were Jew and Gentile, thus establishing peace in one new man. And so when we moved in there, we decided, and that's what the dual expression is, we decided we're going to do a Shabbat. We're not going to have a separate Messianic congregation and Sunday congregation. We are going to be one congregation that celebrates the Shabbat and have a Messianic Shabbat on Saturday and have Sunday services as well as one congregation, that you can go to either or both. But everything else we do will be as one congregation, and outreach and ministry and Bible studies and retreats and all the others. We are one congregation with two expressions. If you want to express it in the Shabbat and the stuff we do through liturgy and the preaching there and the music there, or on Sunday. And it was a big challenge for us. But, I believe this was the heart of God. I don't believe that the separation between the church and the Messianic movement should be there. And too many have put that separation there. And to me, we're one people, Jew and Gentile, one in him.
Wow.
Yeah. So we have and I named it Beth Abraham, the Messianic congregation service, after my grandfather's synagogue in the Bronx. And we brought out the sign from a synagogue, and we put it up on this synagogue.
So this is your grandpa's synagogue was Beth Abraham?
Yeah.
And you got that sign from there, and you brought it back to the synagogue in Denver. Wow.
Yes.
Awesome.
Yeah. That's how we became Church in the City, Beth Abraham.
Wow. That's huge.
Yeah, it was a challenge, because when I went to visit the Bronx with my kids, I said, let's go visit my grandfather's synagogue. And when I did, we got there and it had a cross on it. And I go, oh my gosh, what happened here? And so they didn't even have the name of the church on there. It just said English-speaking service on Sunday. So we went back, and it turned out to be a Puerto Rican Pentecostal church that took over my grandfather's church, synagogue.
Yeah.
But it only had his sign out there. It didn't have anything else. I said, what happened to the sign of your church? Well, right before you got here, this wind came through New York, blew off our sign, and exposed your grandfather's sign. Because I would have never known it was there. I was 5 years old when I left.
Wow.
So I said, we take that sign off and bring it out, and our church will replace your sign. And so we did that. And but the crazy part was, when they took it down, the people broke it up in pieces. They were anti-Semitic, the ones that removed the sign, and they broke up all the Hebrew letters that were on there. And so the pastor was so upset. He said, I'm so sorry. And I said, well, how do we get that sign back together? He said, well, it'll be $10,000 to put the pieces back. And I said, we don't have $10,000. And then this woman in Brooklyn had found out about it, that we want to bring this to one of the synagogues in Denver. And she said, I'll put it back together for you for free. And we didn't even know who she was. And her name was Karen Fix. And Karen Fix fixed the sign. And it's now sitting in our lobby over the menorah.
Wow.
That's in the lobby of the synagogue on the And we brought in Jerusalem stone from Israel, and we've got it on our walls, on our altars, on our floors, everywhere, because we wanted the Holy Land to be in our synagogue. But we didn't know how to do that. And right when we were building it, restoring it, we get a card in the mail that said the Jerusalem Stone Company has now moved to Denver, Colorado. Could we help you? And it's like, are you kidding me? So I put the guy in there, and they said, we want Jerusalem. It was at the time that everything was broken, and it was a mess. And he said, you guys are never going to pull this off. 6 months later, we had crates from Israel filling that place with stone and tile and everything all over the whole synagogue.
Wow.
And the cornerstone we put in, which is, they removed their cornerstone from the synagogue, and we replaced it with Jerusalem stone, and I decided to put Psalm 118:22 on it. The stone that the builders rejected is now the chief cornerstone. That's the cornerstone of that synagogue now. And when the city was coming out and doing a survey of the community, they said, we've determined that the center of this community, we're using the cornerstone of Church in the City, Beth Abraham. And I said, Psalm 118:22 is the center of this community, and it's going on the records in Denver.
Wow.
Who would have known? I would never have known when we put that out. So God he's had his hand on this synagogue.
So first you kind of felt like that was sort of something that you had, and sometimes we feel like that, and then it turns out it really was God's idea, and we were picking up on it. That's pretty amazing. And
him be the glory in all of it. We just get to enjoy it. And like I said, we've had a number of Jewish people come by and wanting a tour of the place and seeing the old synagogue and how it's been restored. Because when they left, it was, like I said, it was going to be destroyed badly. It was in bad shape.
So as a Jewish person, how do you feel as a Jewish person now with everything God's done in you and through you?
I feel more Jewish than I ever have. I really do. I not in a prideful way, as some might think, we're some, this chosen people. We're chosen, and we always say choose someone else to go through the stuff we have. But I feel I never would have imagined ever that I would wind up being in a Orthodox synagogue building that I started in when I was 5 years old, but now worshiping the Jewish Messiah and the Jewish God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and having a Holocaust surviving Torah scroll in my congregation. And I never could have imagined that. And our offices are in the oldest Hebrew school. It was the largest one in Denver that they built in 1938. That's where I'm sitting right now. At 650 students in this Hebrew school. Wow. And I never could have imagined that God could have had a plan like this to return back to my Jewish roots, but with the fulfillment of the Messiah in my life, completing that journey for me.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing with us, Michael. Our time is up, and maybe you can come back and share more about what the new man means to you, or why that's important for our Jewish people to hear that. That would be good. And that's just amazing what God's done in your life and through your life and others, how you've impacted your city.
Thank
you again.
And it's to God be the glory.
Thank you for listening to Tikvah Radio Show, the voice of hope. If you have been blessed by this program and want to join us in sharing with others the hope of Yeshua HaMashiach, a gift of any amount will be appreciated. You can donate and contact us on our website at tikvahradio.com. Once again, that's TIKVAH radio.com. Thank you for joining us, and God bless.